Yakuza Dead Souls, or Of the End as it was called in Japan, was released in 2011 in Japan and then 2012 everywhere else. It was released on the PS3 after the first PSP spin-off Kuroyo and released before its sequel Kuroyo 2. Like some of the other spin-offs in the series, this game never saw any re-releases such as remaster or a remake or a port. However, unlike some of the other spin-offs, this game still got a full English localization, although I'll cover that later in the video because it's unfortunately the stinky old localization style that the games used to have. In the last video I said that this was the second black sheep of the Yakuza franchise. However, this wasn't because it was generally considered to be a bad game like Yakuza 3, but instead it was because it was just weird. It evokes a similar reaction to when schools in Australia, because I don't know if other places tried to pull this, they tried to change Baba Black Sheep to Baba Rainbow Sheep. And what I mean by this is that you look at that situation and you look at Dead Souls, and both of them make you just go, what the what? Rather than being your typical Yakuza game where you run around beating up street punks with fists and bikes, you instead run around shooting zombies in the head with lots of guns. Speaking of shooting stuff, I've never shot any footage for this game myself because I've not played it. I own the game, but my PS3 doesn't really work anymore, and I didn't test it until after I recorded this entire video, but it turns out that with the more recent versions of RPCS3, the game crashes all the time. So, I say a joke that I didn't really realize was true later, and I'll point it out, and it was funny. So feel free to enjoy clips from Narvaez Jr. from Trophy Finder and whatever else I could scrounge together because I've got nothing else to give you. From what I gather from everyone who's played Dead Souls, it's apparently pretty fun, but from what I gather from those very same people, and from the headaches I've induced seeing gameplay of it, the game performs like Star Wars Jedi Survivor on PC, only it looks much worse. Even the mystical and magical Scott Strickard, who used to work on the Yakuza games, admitted to how he refused to continue playing it after he got a headache from playing the game for at least 30 seconds. On top of that, the game has some very, let's just say, paraplegic aiming controls, which pales in comparison to the very smooth and simple controls of the actual games. But also, in terms of significant features this game introduced that later games used, this game had not really anything. Just like Yakuza 4, this game featured 4 playable characters, with Kiryu and Akiyama from 4, but also, for the first time ever, Majima and Ryuji. This means then that this was the only game in the series where you get to play as Ryuji, and by association a main antagonist of a previous game, but it is the first of 2.5 games where you play as Majima, being Yakuza 0 and then the little Majima saga from Kiwami 2, which is what the half is. The 4 characters each have their own main weapon that they use, with Akiyama using the Akimbo perk on some pistols, Majima having a Spas 12 shotty, Kiryu having the big fat AS-50 from Modern Warfare 3, and Ryuji having some mechanical Gatling gun arm thing like Barrett from Final Fantasy 7, although you can still equip other stuff like rocket and grenade launchers and whatever else. The game also has heat actions and shit, so it isn't like it's completely different to the usual gameplay of the series, although the heat actions don't work exactly like the main games do. It also still has some of the mini-games like karaoke or fishing or whatever, but from what I understand, exploration is a lot different as there might be some sections filled with zombies and you have to get rid of them or something, I don't know. If I had to expand more in the gameplay of this game, I don't know, you shoot zombies and then the game lags and that's about it. The thing people like to praise this game for though is the story. It's a lot sillier than the other games, and by bringing back Ryuji for no reason with a bionic arm and having the undead everywhere around Kamurocho, clearly this game doesn't aim to have some sort of massive lasting impact on the rest of the series. As I said before, this game has the old localization style of games before Yakuza 0. What that mostly means is that there are some very inaccurate subtitles. I will now demonstrate and pretend now that I'm speaking full Japanese and it's being subtitled. Hello Kiryu, how are you doing today on this very fine day where there is not a cloud in the sky? But then they also do stuff like this. Hello. Then that leads me to the next bit, where characters will quite very clearly say things like Hana-chan, Akiyama-san, Kiryu-chan, or just Kiryu, but then the game will subtitle those things as Hana, Mr. A, Kazi, and Kazuma. It's a small thing, but back in those days, that's just what localizers did for whatever stupid reason. But anyway, that's not a problem exclusive to this game, and instead a problem with all of the English translations up until they actually started trying with Yakuza 0. Although the reason I pointed it out was simply because Yakuza 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all got relocalized scripts with their remakes and remasters, but Dead Souls obviously got shit all. Then there's the soundtrack, which as you'd probably expect from the series, is still pretty good. Although it's one that I never really find myself listening to, but again, that's because of my lack of experience with the game. The songs have never really been remixed or reused in any of the other games as far as I'm aware, besides one instance being the big Dead Souls reference Long Battle thing in Kiwami, where it plays Majima's battle theme from Dead Souls. A fun fact about this game's soundtrack though was this was the first Yakuza game that Hidenori Shoji didn't compose anything for, although he still did do some work for the game, unlike Kuroyo 2, where PS3 had nothing to do with it. Now then, there is one last thing I'd like to mention, and it's again related to the localization. Dead Souls kinda almost killed the franchise in the West. As could be seen with Kenzan and Kuroyo never being localized, Sega slowly over time felt less and less confident that their games would perform well outside of Japan. But bizarrely, they felt that it was worth localizing Dead Souls, and considering that the game was criticized quite heavily for being a bit shit compared to the favorable reviews of Yakuza 3 and 4, Sega of Japan probably went, oh for fuck's sake, I knew the Americans wouldn't have liked it, and so Kuroyo 2 never got localized, and Yakuza 5 took 3 years to get localized. They probably thought that zombies being popular, especially around that era of every game having zombies in one way or another, that it might do well globally. They probably also thought that the Americans in particular would like the game because of the ludicrous amount of guns, but Battlefield 2042 also had a lot of guns, and we all know how that went, except for me because the game's actually really good now and has still been pretty fun for quite a while, which is why I have 702 hours in it. I will say though, if you wanted to play some Japanese zombie game that didn't take itself too seriously, you could very easily just play Resident Evil. While I've not played it, Resident Evil Revelations was apparently pretty good, and it came out around the same time as this, although it only came to PS3 in 2013. So if you wanted a PS3 game, the big RE game before Revelations was 5, but then the big RE game released in the same year as Dead Souls was 6. Maybe it was just a sign of the time that zombie games were becoming more and more unpopular, considering it had been 2 years since Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare came out, so people kind of realized that things wouldn't get any better than this. Then at the same time, Black Ops 1 was 2010, with Black Ops 2 coming out in 2012, so while you could say that Dead Souls had the hilarious story and fun side content attached to it, Undead Nightmare had Red Dead Redemption tied to it, and then both of the Black Ops games had the zombie stuff just as a fun minigame to distract you from the multiplayer and campaign. So again, while Yakuza 5 may still have had problems in its localization regardless of Dead Souls' release, Dead Souls probably played a part in again almost killing the franchise in the West. But with that being said, despite its doo-doo performance both in terms of reputation and frame rate, for what it is, it's not bad. And again, lots of people do say that they do enjoy it. Fortunately, thanks to its English localization, you can still pick up the game and play it a bit easier than something like Kenzan. I don't know what emulating the game is like, but I would imagine it would probably make your computer want to die, not because it can't run it, but simply because Dead Souls will refuse to let it be run. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then you can hit the subscribe button, which if you were to try and do that in Dead Souls, it would probably be hard as shit because it controls like us. Be sure though to tune into the next video where we look at Kuroyo 2, the sequel to like the best PSP game ever made.